This is real life, and we all have our moments. It's hard. It's hard to be a human on this planet right now, and there are many people who are kind of burying their head in the sand and just, going for the zombie thing because it's easier. And one thing that I will say that is my big message right now is the majority of the people on the planet want to live in a generous way. If you can become in any way an inspiration to another human being, that's a victory.
So excited for this reality riffing. A wonderful, incredible man is with us today that many of you will know, Ricky Williams. He's also the husband of a great woman here who comes to class, Linnea, and some of you know her as well. But Ricky is very well known for being a former 12-season NFL running back and Heisman Trophy winner. He now has immersed himself in the study of evolutionary astrology, which we're going to talk about, as well as other healing modalities and his own healing journey, including Ayurvedic medicine, cranial sacral therapy, meditation, pranic healing, and yoga. And he's currently pursuing his doctorate in Chinese medicine, which you may have not known about him. But I wanted to have you on the show for so many reasons. I've been so excited to meet you and talk to you about some of the things that we both enjoy and are interested in, and especially because we're going into this eclipse season. So I thought we could have a good astro chat. Yes. So I would love for you to, for my astro nerds out there, maybe just kind of give us a little background on how you got into astrology and maybe a little bit about your own chart.
Yeah, how I got into astrology. So in 2004, I was 27. And 27, we all go through what's called a lunar return. It's when the progressed moon comes back to the progressed moon. And so my chart, I have my natal moon is in the 10th house in Cancer, which is interpreted as my profession or my calling is as a healer. And at this point in time, I was playing professional football, which was very different from being a healer. Yeah. And I realized that maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I retired and I started traveling around the world. My son is in the 9th house in Gemini. And so to take care of my son, it's interesting conversations with strangers from different cultures. Yeah. And so I found myself, went to Australia and backpacking through Australia, meeting different people. And it was very powerful. I started to get a clear reflection of who I was, because up until that point, my whole life had been defined as I've been a football player and an African-American football player and everything that goes along with that. And as I was traveling around the world to people who had no idea what an African-American was, they call us American Africans, and had no idea what football was, they call it gridiron. And so they just got to see a person. And I started to realize that, hey, maybe I'm not just a football player, that I'm intelligent and that I'm sensitive and I have other things to offer the world. So I come to this crisis where I realized I don't have a skill. I played football my whole life, didn't pay much attention in school. So I don't really have a skill. And I realized, okay, I have to find something to do with the rest of my life. And so I sat and meditated on it, and I thought, like, what am I good at? And I just had all these memories come to me of talking to people, sharing insight, and really helping people. And so I thought, maybe I'm a healer. And so when I came back to the States from my trip, I discovered Ayurveda while I was on my trip. And so I went online and I looked, I wonder if there's a place you could study Ayurveda in the US. And of course, right, there was a program in Northern California that was starting in 2 weeks. So I drove up to Northern California, enrolled in school, and started to immerse myself into this completely different worldview. I mean, in June, I was getting ready for training camp. In October, I was learning about karma and dharma and like all these concepts that I had never heard of. I'd never heard of them, but they reminded me a lot of what I experienced as a kid in church. This idea, and I got the sense that there's a root to religion and spirituality that people in India seem to be connected to, and so I was fascinated, and I really dove in. So part of my Ayurvedic coursework is we had yoga instructors come in for different modules, and the first module was Ashtanga yoga, power yoga. And coming from the football world, and this was my introduction into yoga, I was great. I mean, I was a football player. I thought, yoga's for girls.
Right.
And after a couple of weeks of this class, I was really, really into it. Like, this is hard and challenging, and it's mastery. And my Virgo rising was like, yeah. And the third module was actually Kundalini yoga.
Okay.
But the second module was Shivananda yoga. And there was a Shivananda ashram about 15 minutes away from the school. And so one of the swamis came to teach the class. And after the first class, we finished final relaxation, and I had like this sense of peace that I had never experienced in my life. And so after, I went up to him and I said, how do I get more of this? And he said, there's an ashram right down the road if you want to come. And so I said, okay. But in my mind, I was thinking, what's an ashram? And there's no way I'm ever going to be at one. Okay. So a couple of days later, Saturday morning, I got up and I was thinking, maybe I will check out that ashram. But I was kind of nervous. And of course, synchronicity has it, a friend of mine came into town and she had been to the ashram. And so I felt a little safer going there for the first time. So I went to the ashram that morning. I took the asana class. And after the class, the head swami there, someone told her I was a football player. And she came up to me and she looked at me and she said, where's your Mars? And I looked at her like, huh? And she said, where's your Mars? And I said, I don't know. She said, after you're done eating, come up to my house and let's talk. And so I walked up to her house after I ate, and she asked for my birth time and my birth date, and I knew it. I have a twin sister, so that's part of our mythos, our mythology.
So some Gemini twins, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we really are the Gemini twins.
Yeah.
And we spent about 2.5, 3 hours talking about my chart. And afterwards, I was blown away by this strange woman from another land somehow could see me more clearly than everyone in my life. And I was fascinated with what she was able to do with this tool, and I started studying with her. I started studying scriptures, I started studying yoga, I started studying Vedic astrology with her. And I didn't make it to the third module of Kundalini yoga because I decided to leave school and travel with her to India. And that's where I took my first yoga teacher training course. And again, really immersing myself into yogic philosophy and into Vedic astrology.
Interesting. And where is your Mars? Western and Vedic.
This is interesting because I started out Vedic. And in Vedic astrology, my Mars is in Pisces. Western astrology, my Mars is in Aries.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And again, so I kept studying with her Vedic astrology maybe 2.5 years. And I met a Vedic astrologer who used the Western Zodiac. And so I really liked his work. And so I said, I'm going to try it out and see. And I started, switching all the charts over, and they just started to sing, They just started to sing, and I said, I'm going to make the switch. And so I started studying more Western astrology.
Interesting. It's not that often that I meet someone who actually made the switch. Because usually you pick one and you kind of for those of you who are out there who don't know the kind of Vedic Western astrology conundrum, it's people have strong opinions about these things, and there's something called the precession of the equinoxes that people have strong opinions about. You can Google it. We won't get too far into it, but we could. So that's kind of a big
just to
leap.
speak on that. So my chart, right, I have Virgo rising and my sun is in Gemini, and both of those signs are ruled by the planet Mercury. Okay,
Yeah.
My Mercury's in the 8th house in Taurus, so it's this earthy Mercury. And so for me, as I was studying Vedic astrology, it was beautiful, right? Because a lot of the Vedas, it's stories, and you really it really touches you and it really moves you. And even on trips to India, visiting all the temples of the planets, it was amazing. But my Mercury needs for things to make sense, needs for things to be more grounded. And so as I was playing with Vedic astrology, it worked, but there was still something missing, and my mind just kept looking, right? That Gemini mind, that curiosity just kept searching for, I know there's something here, let's make it work. I switched over to Western, it started to sing, but still I felt there was something missing. And when I rediscovered the nodes, that's when everything for me really opened up, and I finally started to get astrology. This piece, this idea with the nodes is that we come from somewhere. We're not born as a blank slate.
Right.
So for instance, you'll see some Aries who are balls to the wall, and some Aries that seem to be a little bit more timid. And that didn't make sense to me. But when I started studying the nodes, I got it.
I'm really, this is like, I didn't know this was exactly where you kind of entered the conversation, because I had a similar experience with the moon's nodes and had stumbled on Jan Spiller's work, who has left the planet, but I think is really one of the only people in modern day that really kind of spelled this stuff out in a way that I could understand it, even though I also kind of Vedic astrology was the first thing I came into contact with, but I didn't really, I went towards Western astrology pretty, quickly. Yeah. Although I'm 5 planets in Leo in Vedic astrology, which does make a little sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
It makes a little sense, you know what I mean? So I don't think it's completely untrue.
Honestly, I had a reading from a Vedic astrologer in India, and he was right on, right? And I think that they both speak to you. And I think depending on the person using the tool, there's going to be one that resonates more with you. Even inside of Western astrology, there's 4 different house systems, and it's finding like what aspect orbs, right? Just finding what techniques, what system, what works for you. Yeah.
So for those out there who are not in the lexicon of the astro talk, the moon's nodes, how do you give a layman's guide to the moon's nodes in your natal chart, and then also the transiting moons?
Yeah. So natal chart. The nodes of the moon. So the nodes of the moon, they're used a lot in Vedic astrology, actually, Rahu and Ketu.
Yeah.
The south node of the moon represents the past, where you came from. And people who are comfortable with it, I like to use the metaphor of past lives, right? The idea that, like I said earlier, when you're born, you're not a blank slate. You have a past with you. Yeah. Whether it's, you want to call it your family history, it's passed along through DNA, past lives, whatever metaphor you want to use. It's the past. And the north node represents the future, where you're headed. And the significance is, I talked about this yesterday to a friend. Like, I used the analogy of being in the 3rd grade. And I said, imagine you're in the 3rd grade and your parents, have to move to a different town where the rules are different, and you have to repeat the 3rd grade again, right? You're probably going to be the best student in the 3rd grade, right? But it's going to be boring. And you might learn a little bit and you might grow, but it's not going to be nearly as much as you would grow if you were in the 4th grade. Yeah. And so the south node is something that we've done and we've done and we've done and we've done and we've done, and it's become habit. And so when we come into this life, it just feels natural to gravitate towards the south node. Like, my south node is in Aries, right? And I gravitated towards sports. Towards football. Yeah. I mean, it's my story astrologically is really poetry. Yeah. And then what the north node represents, my teacher says it's a suggestion, right? Something that if you can consciously move towards, you're going to move away from the south node and move into your evolutionary history. Yeah. I mean, your evolutionary future.
Yeah. Yeah, which will become your evolutionary history.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're just dust, but a Scorpio rising. I like to think about those things.
I love it. I got Pluto in the first. We can.
So when people are looking, let's say they want to know more about their the nodes of their moons, how do they find it on a chart?
So the nodes, a lot of software, a lot of charts now, and this is really interesting that I've noticed is, I'm working with this plugin on my website to give people some astrological information, and they list the north node, but they don't list the south node.
That's right.
And like, it seems like modern astrology is all about the north node, node. And I get this sense of people, and like when I sit down to talk to people about their charts, right? I start with the past. Yeah. And what I constantly get is, we don't need to talk about the past, that's history. We don't need to talk about that. And I think people have this sense, but maybe it's my Cancer moon, but I think there's so much valuable information in the past. Yeah. When I look at my chart, I spend most of the time not looking at what's coming in the future. I look more of trying to understand where I've come from and trying to understand my past, because I understand my past, I have clarity about who I am now, and it makes it easier to create a future that's going to be fulfilling and exciting for me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm going to totally hack this, but probably at least say his name kind of right, which is Goethe, has that quote about, basically, if you're not studying the history, then
you're going to repeat it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's my friend Patty, who I was just telling you about, who a lot of the listeners know, Patty, who's one of our astrology badasses around here. She talks about basically lowest common denominator. Like if you don't know your South Node, you don't know what your backsliding tendency is.
Amen. Well said.
And you know, when you're not like well rested and well behaved and well, you know, on your best behavior, you're gonna slide into South Node territory.
I would even say most people, even when they're healthy, if they don't understand their South Node, they're already slid into it, especially the first half of their lives.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
It was interesting. I was in the airport yesterday, and I started having a conversation with someone next to me, and it was this young woman. She's in her early 20s, attractive woman, and we were talking, and she told me that she was in the military. And I looked, and it was just strange to me that this woman was in the military. So we started talking, and she knew her birth information. And so I looked at her chart. Her South Node was in Aries, in the 11th house, which 11th house is groups. Mm-hmm. Aries is the warrior, so she was in the military in a past life, and in this life, right, she's right back in the military.
I just got a little chill on that. Yeah. Got you loud and clear. So people can, and how about the trend? Because I was just talking to an astrologer yesterday who was telling me that the transiting moon's nodes are about to change, which is kind of a significant movement in terms of the transits. Here's my point of view, and I understand why people read their horoscopes and want to know what's going on right now. But the analogy I use is transits, progressions. You know, what's going on now is like the weather, okay? And so let's say we see that a storm is coming, all right? The problem is we don't know, are we a storm chaser or are we a cockroach, right? And so to understand transits and progressions, to understand what's going on right now, you first have to know who you are to understand how that's going to affect you, right? Because most people think they're cockroaches and they run and hide when a storm comes, but really they're storm chasers and they should be out there embracing the storm. Mm-hmm, you know? Mm-hmm. And so when people ask what's going on now, I say let's start with the root prediction. We have to understand who you are so we understand what's going on and how it affects you. Mm-hmm. Another point about transits and progressions is you can think of your planets in your natal chart as like an antenna, right? And for those who remember the old radios in the car where you had to push the button and it would slide over, and if you were a little bit off, it was fuzzy. You had to be right on, and you got that clear signal. Okay, right. So as planets are moving in the sky now or progressing, they only really affect us if they're in the range of in an angular relationship or on top of another planet, because that's then the natal planet, the antenna can pick up the signal. So we talk with people, I know you guys talk a lot about new moons and full moons. Mm-hmm. And yes, they affect everyone. But you have a new moon or you have a full moon right on top of your sun, right on top of your moon, right on top of one of your planets. Yeah. You're really going to feel the effect of that. Yeah. But how about, what's your take on like America's chart or Trump's chart, or, you know, the leaders' charts and how that affects like these bigger kind of...
So a good example of Trump's chart, right? Trump is Gemini. Yeah. I'm a Gemini. I get it. But I think when you see someone in the public eye, right, what you know is that their chart is interacting with the chart of the country, mm-hmm. right, the chart of a collective. And you know, whatever you think about Trump, and I probably could guess what you think about Trump, it's the idea, you know, I think he's got Venus in the 12th house. Okay?
In Cancer, right? Yeah. I'm
pretty sure. I might be off.
I know his Venus is in Cancer because he has those behaviors. And I remember, and it's conjunct America's like sun or something like this. Yeah.
But there's his 12th house, and 12th house is where it's a mystic house, right? It's a mystical house. It's where we connect to spirit, where we connect to something else. And something about Trump's 12th house is just naturally he picks up on the vibrations of the collective. And I think
he has Pluto and Mars in the 12th in Leo.
Pluto and that's what.
And then in the 11th he has Venus in Cancer, Saturn in Cancer.
It's both of those.
Mercury in Cancer.
All of that Cancer in the 11th house.
So the 11th house collectives, groups, right?
Yeah.
And you see his rise, right? He came at the right time, and he had a voice. He was a voice for a lot of people who had been silenced in this country. And he had the courage, right? Gemini, Sag, he had the courage and the voice to give that, right? To put that in the world. And the people who had been silenced rallied around that, right? And so it's about, when you see leaders rise, it's because something about them is in tune with the zeitgeist, what needs to occur, what needs to change. And I see Pluto, right? This Pluto and Leo generation, right? Is the baby boomers, you know, because Pluto's about bringing the shadow stuff, the dark, murky stuff that no one wants to talk about, no one wants to think about. Pluto's about bringing that stuff to the surface so that it can be dealt with, right? And if you're conscious and you're brave and you bring it to the surface and you're willing to go through it and face it, you move through it and you have more wisdom. If you're not, you tend to re-traumatize yourself. As that stuff comes up and you're not clear, you just bumble it up and you get yourself in the hole again. And so I think with Trump, right time, right place, a person to give voice, to be a catalyst for the change that we need. And you know, I went back to school after I retired from football, and so I was around a lot of young people during the election, and how outraged everyone, not just the young people, but how outraged everyone was. And my perspective was, first of all, is like we kind of elected him. Right. And I think if we
kind of elected him. I like where we're going with that.
Yeah.
He also had interesting transits with America because I think he's a Cancer.
He's a Gemini.
Who? Bush Jr.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about Bush Jr.
No, I was talking about Trump.
Oh,
still
got
talking
it.
about Trump.
Oh, you were still talking. Okay, sorry. I glazed over. Well, you know, I was being re-traumatized. So
we're all and I think that's it. I think we're all being re-traumatized. I really do. Yeah. I really do. And speaking of the chart of America, it's this idea when America began, right, especially in the South, it was just a carryover from Europe, where there was the Lord who had all the money and he had tenants that did all the work, right? Yeah. So most of the people looked up to the wealthy person to understand what to do. And we see this being repeated again, right? People don't have a lot, people are struggling and they're waiting for the Messiah or someone. And I think in our country, the Messiah are the wealthy people, right? I think the mythos of America and the American dream is anyone can work to
money is God.
Anyone can work to become successful, which means you have money. And what we see now, people might have money, but people also have a lot of meaninglessness. And that was my story. I mean, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Growing up as a little African-American boy in San Diego, California, you're looking around and seeing people aren't very nice to me, and it seems like it's not cool. And maybe if I'm like have money and I have, fame, that people will treat me better. Right. Didn't work out so well.
That's the and I do think, whatever your politic, there's something fascinating about the crumbling of empires.
Yes.
And who has to play those parts, and who and how that relates to these cosmic kind of
who has
cycles.
who has to play the parts. I love that. I love that.
We were sitting in an audience with this Rinpoche named Taisitu, and he was kind of they were in 100-day empowerment, which is like a heavy duty. It's like every single day he's giving major empowerments to his students, and it's like a major kind of like power. It's a lot of work, we'll just say. But so he just wanted to shoot the shit with us, and so he wanted to talk about Trump, and so we were talking about politics, and he was just kind of chuckling about the basically that no empire can last more than, I think the number he gave was 282 years. And there may be, it starts to crumble as we get towards that. And I was thinking about that and how like assured he was about that, and then kind of comparing it to all of the other empires and the cycles and what's a Pluto cycle?
256 years.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. And Pluto does have a lot to do with power.
Exactly.
But the one place I would question that is the whole idea of empires, right? It arose in the Piscean age. Right? This idea of, we give up our freedom to something greater, right? And my sense is, now that we're in the Aquarian age, where it's more about independent freedom, that my sense is the idea of what we consider an empire or a country or a nation or any collective is really going to change, and it's going to alter. And I think this is what I was saying earlier about Trump, is I think if individuals, if we would have been more comfortable with the Donald Trump inside of us, maybe things could be different.
Yeah.
And I think this is an opportunity, if we take it or not, who knows, to start to get to know the Donald Trump inside of us all, if we want things to change.
Yeah. Well, I've been using a lot more bronzer.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's my civic duty.
We all gotta find our way. Yeah. I've been using my hands more when I talk. Yeah. And taking the H out of words, working on my being more humble.
I'm trying to take a more tyrannical approach to all of my business dealings. So we'll see how it goes. But so speaking of business, I know that you're an entrepreneur and that you've actually launched a new business, and I'm sure there's been other businesses before this. I'm not positive. Maybe,
not really. Okay. After I retired from football, I started to really think about entrepreneurship, and actually went to a bunch of conferences and met with a lot of people. And what I realized was my football career, I was an entrepreneur. Yeah. You start off in Little League or whatever, and then you go to college, and you're trying to build your brand. And I built my brand, and I sold it to New Orleans Saints, for $8 million.
Right.
And it's just like, entrepreneurs build a business and they sell it and then they become slaves, right? And so when I left,
yeah, I know about that.
and so when I left football, I started thinking about what is entrepreneurship, and so I started asking, old guys, the elders, what is entrepreneurship to you? And the best answer I got was this old school guy in Texas, and he said it's simple. He said you find a need and you fill it. And so in this business that I started, when I started studying Ayurveda, I started learning about medicinal herbs, And for people who know my story, my departure from the NFL was very much tied to failing drug tests for using cannabis. Yeah. And so as I went on this journey that I talked about earlier, that landed me in Northern California studying Ayurveda, I realized that as a football player, I was popping pills like crazy. I had an ulcer when I was 19 from taking too many Advil, and really realizing that there's a different way to do this, And like everyone, like most other people, I believe that, herbs are don't really work. Yeah. Until I started playing with them and using them, and I found out, wow, if you have some knowledge about how these chemicals, these botanicals work together, it can be very powerful medicine. And also I've noticed in our culture that cannabis, CBD, THC is starting to gain in popularity. And
really, I was saying yesterday, I said last night in class, I'm like, I just want everyone to know, I feel like I need to apologize. This class doesn't come with CBD oil.
Yeah, you should.
I feel like I need to apologize about this. But
so the need that I saw was, wow, people are open to cannabis, which is a medicinal herb. It's considered toxic also, a toxic medicinal herb.
Right.
Maybe this is a opening to reintroduce herbs, plant medicine, herbalism to people. And so I saw the opportunity, so I took my knowledge of formulas, added a little bit of THC, a little bit of CBD. And for me, it's really about seeing an opening and putting something in the market that is actually truly can be called medicinal marijuana. Yeah. I could go on a whole nother spiel about this, but I am one of the believers, and I think that yes, it's nice that people are having more and more open minds, but I think most people are abusing it. Yeah. Because I was talking to this guy in India about this, and he said, people don't understand. They said cannabis is a spirit-centered plant, but it's tamasic. Yeah. And if you have to realize, a spirit-centered plant, and the idea of spirit is that we're not this body. We're something more expansive, and if you're abusing or not using cannabis right, you're gonna find that out pretty quickly. Yeah. But you don't really have the if you don't have a practice, you don't have the tools, you don't have anything, you're gonna be stuck on the couch watching television because you're letting go of stuff. But the whole idea of altered states, however you get there, right? I don't want to be too judgmental about it, but the whole thing about altered states is that, to me, I think of it, it's an escape, right? And you can escape in a positive way. You can escape and get inspiration and bring back to deal with your life. But a lot of people are doing, they're escaping because they don't have the tools to deal with their life.
Which is one of my big, kind of issues with what's happening in the medical marijuana movement is that, there is an agenda that wants to keep people stoned and on their couch. So because they're much more easily controllable if they're stoned and on their couch than, awake and doing something about what's going on the planet. So
thank you. I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you.
And I think that it's, and one thing I was very impressed with by what you guys are doing with your business is that, and we sent some of your products to my mom, who actually has a real use for these products because she has Parkinson's. And I think that there's just a level of quality there that's really like not being, a level of real medicinal kind of energy. So congratulations. I mean, I think that I don't know a lot about that industry because I'm in the get people high on Kundalini industry. Yeah. But it definitely, I think the energy that was just emanating off the products are very noticeable in terms of the medicinal kind of quality.
We try to be conscious, and really, to me, because I was approached by a lot of people, I have a name in that industry, and when I really thought about it, I said, all I want to do is make medicine and educate people, because I think this, it's potentially a powerful tool, but I don't think, as a whole, we're anywhere close to being able to handle it. In a healthy way.
I was talking to somebody who has been very, I think, behind the scenes in terms of investing in a lot of companies that have pushed the medical marijuana agenda in California particularly forward. And he was just saying the reason he did it was not even that he's really a user of cannabis or medicinally or recreationally, but he just wants to get people out of bars. Yeah. Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah,
I thought that was very interesting. I mean, I haven't heard someone say it quite like that. And he was just like, I just feel like it's better than alcohol. Yeah, basically. Yeah. So, but as you guys are building the business, and I know that you're in kind of some different phases of what that means right now. Anything to offer to people who are building business or trying to fill a niche that they see?
Well, I think what I've learned from my background as an athlete, is you can't do it by yourself, and it's so important to put a team around you. Yeah. It's so important. Anything you're doing, I think it's, you understand what your core competency is, what you're passionate about, what you do, and understand what you really don't want to do and you really don't like to do, and find people that's their passion.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 1,000%. Yeah. I mean, it's both delegation. I think takes. I can speak Virgo rising to Virgo to Virgo rising. Delegation takes more than any. I mean, delegation takes more capacity than doing it yourself.
It sure does.
Yep.
Sure does. Trust, faith.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. What else? I think the biggest thing is, and I think football taught me this too, is stress can be your friend or stress can be your enemy.
Yeah.
It depends on your attitude towards it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think there's like such a value in, and that's really what the Kundalini technology is they've actually proven, you actually can't get certain stressors out of your system if you don't present other stressors into your system. It's impossible, and they've proven it in science. It's
Sounds like Pluto.
Yeah. It's very
I talk about it like that. I talk about, because when I talk about people that have strong Scorpio or Plutonic or 8th house energy in their chart, I say you need a life that's intense. And what I've realized is we bury things so far that we need something intense to take us to that level, to wake it up, to get it to come to the surface. And I think it's very similar, I think, to what you just said, is we have to have these experiences to match the intensity of what the wounding to be able to help it come to the surface.
Yeah.
Same thing in craniosacral therapy. When I'm working with someone, you can feel the intensity starting to come back as the person sinks down. And my job is to find out, because in a craniosacral work, we tune into a rhythm, right? and there's different rhythms. So we tune into a rhythm, and you can tell as the body's moving, it'll go over a place where it'll like hop over really quick because it doesn't want to deal with what's there.
Right.
And so as they start to relax and things slow down and the person gets to that point, my job is to gently see if they're ready to stay there, because if they could stay there to where the trauma occurred, they can start to get ideas, images, pictures that can help them reconnect to it, and they're in a safe place with a powerful healer, and they're more mature, and they're more conscious now. And if they're willing to have the courage to stay there and look at it, they might see something different. You know? And in this way, we can recover parts of our soul that has been lost.
That's a beautiful way of describing it, because the nervous system, like I don't know exactly the words you guys use in cranial sacral therapy, but in Kundalini, we're basically you're activating the inherent intelligence of the nervous system.
Yeah, we call it the inner physician.
Yeah. Cool. And so I'm curious, and we were talking a little before the show about this. I always talk about kind of there's a certain mind frame to being an elite athlete that I think is very similar to being a healer or a conscious person or a Jedi or someone who's taking the spiritual path in this incarnation. I think it's actually though there may be different levels of actual kind of awareness. I think there's actually a similarity in the state, and I'm really curious.
I agree
100%.
I agree 100%. So like I was saying, I was getting ready for training camp. Less than a year later, I was in India taking a teacher training course.
Yeah.
And it was one of those intensive 28 days, in the ashram life. And I felt so at home. It felt like training camp. And the same muscles I was using to train for football were the same muscles I was using for my spiritual training. And I think it's the axis, the Virgo Pisces axis, and this idea of again, Virgo is about purity, and it's about perfection. And the way we become pure and perfect is through practice. And if you practice and you practice and you practice, it's like you bust through to this other state. And in football, I mean, we practice way more than we play, and it's the repetitive. When I was growing up as a football player, I could run fast, but I wasn't the best athlete. But I loved practice. I loved the opportunity that every day I could go and get better at something. And I guarantee the first game where I noticed I was any good, it surprised me. It was just the practice, and then I got in that moment, and then something took over, and I got the ball. Next thing I knew, I was in the end zone, and everyone was cheering. It was the same thing my last year playing. It's just training so much that I got the ball. My body started doing things I can't explain.
Right.
Sometimes it felt like I was moving through space faster than my body could actually move.
Right.
And for me, it was just that idea of you practice so much, you start to have faith and you start to believe, and your body just takes over. I'm telling you, there's nothing like that feeling when you're in the zone in a football game, because there's 11 guys, big guys, trying to take you over, and somehow was able to like maneuver, get through them, get by them. Nothing like it.
Wow. Have you had that experience in any of your kind of healing or meditative practices?
I have it almost every time that I'm working on someone.
Yeah.
And it's more powerful when there's another person there, because like you walk into a room, you can tell if someone's really angry or there was just a fight, or someone's really happy, and when you're in an intimate situation with someone, like they're picking up on what's going on with me, and I'm picking up on what's going on with them. And so in that state together, when like the rhythms like sync, it's really powerful. And you drop down, and I perceive like movements of blood through a blood vessel.
Right.
Wow. It's mind-blowing what our bodies are capable of doing when we let them.
It's religious.
Yeah.
I always say you want to like have a religious experience, like study your anatomy.
Yeah.
Because it is, it's the symphony, the orchestra of our,
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
I think anybody who has some good Virgo in their charts can appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I could be, So what I learned in football is to take care of myself, I'd spend half an hour before practice just sitting on the floor and just feeling my body, and I could find a stretch or a muscle, and I could be there for 20 minutes, like almost in ecstasy, just being present with what's going on. And this connection between the mind and the body, it's, you create more space in your body, you're going to create more space in your mind and in your consciousness.
Yeah. What's your vibe on the vagus nerve?
Wow. I love the vagus nerve.
I love the vagus nerve. You love the vagus nerve?
So here's how I learned about the vagus nerve. I was playing up in Toronto, and I broke my arm, so I wasn't playing. And my trainer suggested I go see an osteopath. This is how I started learning about craniosacral therapy. And so I started seeing this osteopath, and it was the first time that I sat with the doctor, and we just sat and talked for 45 minutes before we did anything. So he really wanted to get to know who I was. He put me on the table, started working on me, and started talking about a vagus nerve. And I just kept thinking about Las Vegas, of course. And then he explained what it was. And he did a lot of work on my vagus nerve. And that's all I did for about 2 months. And then when my arm was healthy enough to start playing again, I was a better football player after this injury than I was before without any practice. And I'm sure it was the work he did on my vagus nerve.
Interesting.
Right? It's this idea, but the connection between this brain and this brain.
Yes. Yes.
And also, a lot of healers, we talk about the brain that's in our belly, right? And when people talk about gut instincts, right? I feel it in my gut, right? Imagine when your gut is connected to your intelligence.
Yeah.
That's the vagus nerve.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think it's interesting, all the Western science that's kind of coming out that proves a lot of what the yogic science has known for thousands and thousands of years, that this vagus nerve is very connected to the kind of, the states of compassion and empathy and limbic resonance that we can actually create, and then the really inherent intelligence. It's kind of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
We have a studio audience today, which we hardly ever get, but we have a studio audience, and I feel like if we have some questions, we should take them. Do you guys have some questions? Yeah, do it.
Can you speak a little bit to the interaction between your astrology and healing practices, like when you've read someone's chart and then you do body work with them?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I've started doing that more. I feel like I've been collecting all these tools, and now I'm at a place where I'm starting to integrate all the tools together. And so for me, when I look at someone's chart, again, I start at the South Node, and I try to understand where does this person come from, and I get an idea. When you see difficult aspects in a chart or just difficult placements. We talk about, in our consciousness, it creates tension, right? When one part of me wants to go this way, one part wants to go that way, it creates tension. And so after doing a reading, I get a sense of, at least in the person's consciousness, where the tension lies. And then as I work on the body, I'm looking for where do they hold this tension in their body. And it creates a connection between things that we just spent a couple hours talking about and what does it actually feel like in your body.
In the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also a lot of times talking about the South Node in a reading, it primes the body to show the person, once they're in that relaxed state, to show them visions connected to the past life stuff.
Interesting. What's your take on medical astrology? Because I find this stuff super interesting.
Yeah. I'm still playing with medical astrology. I have one experience to me that's really got me very, very curious about it. I was playing football. I'd just been reinstated after a long suspension, and I would practice for a week, and we were playing in Pittsburgh, and it was pouring down rain, and so I was sitting there in the locker room thinking to myself, okay, I haven't played football in over a year. I've only practiced a week. I'm not in great shape. That field is horrible, and these guys have been playing for 10 weeks, and that's one of the best defenses in the NFL. I probably shouldn't be playing today, but Aries South Node, the heroicism, right? I'm tough, the tough man. I thought about walking up and telling my coach that I wasn't going to play, and that to me was like, you can't do that. You can't do that. And Mars was going over my 10th house Cancer moon, okay? And Cancer rules the chess. So I didn't tell him that, and I decided to play, okay? First play of the second quarter, I get the ball, I drop it, I'm pushing myself up to go get it. Someone steps on my chest, I tear my pec right off of my humerus bone.
Oh my God.
Right? And so the way I look at this is Mars is about courage, right? And it took courage for me to tell my coach I wasn't ready to play. I didn't have that courage, and so Mars had to teach me courage in another way, the courage of going through a surgery to have my pec reattached to my arm. But I learned, right? I learned that, one of the things I have to learn to do is speak up for myself and take care of myself. That this old story of being heroic, right, not going to serve me so well anymore.
Yeah. Have you seen it play out at all with your clients?
I haven't seen it that much, and maybe it's just my lens isn't tuned right, but I'm still working with this. That's how I've learned astrology is I read a book or I talk to a teacher and get ideas, and then I try to see, okay, what does it look like in real life? And medical astrology is still something that I'm playing with.
Yeah, I think, I'm curious, maybe next time we have a chat, it might be because I've seen, something people don't know as much about me is I spent a decade as a hands-on healer.
Really?
Yes. And I can't do it anymore because of the demands of my time, but I certainly use all of the capacities in the group setting.
Yeah.
And so, and you obviously, I think all great yogis and masters of any kind of technique are using that's broadcasting in their aura. Yeah. Not saying that I'm a master, but that is part of I think what we're developing. In any kind of healing setting, whether you're touching someone or you're just holding them in a mind or a heart space.
Yeah.
But I was very fascinated to see how, like the Capricorn, if people had strong Capricorn, how it came out in the bones, or if they had the strong Pisces placements or certain angles to the Pisces, they would have feet problems, or the certain aspects of, I also think it's really interesting the way the rising, the ascendant kind of shows up physically. Yeah. I've always thought that, in the moment I said before we started the show, I was like, where's your Cancer? Because you look Cancerian to me. So that there's physical attributes and physical kind of aspecting that does show up in the hologram.
It does. I mean, I've had tons of ankle injuries. Like as a football player, that was my Achilles heel, no pun intended. Was my ankle. Yeah. Saturn in the 11th.
Interesting. Yeah. So wait, how are you doing that Saturn in the 11th? You had Saturn Pisces in the 11th?
No. So ankles are feet. I mean, feet are Pisces. Ankles, shins are Aquarius.
Or Aquarius.
11th house. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that, and I don't feel, but maybe I don't know all of this, but I think this is some uncharted territory. Like
it was charted a long time ago. There's a lot of old books on medical astrology, but I haven't found anything recently. And the old stuff is kind of arcane and it's difficult to read.
It is.
And I haven't seen anyone really do anything recently. So I took a herbalism seminar earlier this year, and this idea of combining, because a lot of herbalists, it's differential diagnosis, and so we observe the person and we try to see patterns, and it's the same thing in astrology. And I have this sense that one of the things I'm going to do in this lifetime is put together a system of medical astrology that allows herbalists to use a chart to help themselves. In India, Ayurvedic practitioners, a lot of them are skilled in astrology, and they'll use a chart to diagnose.
Yes, exactly. And there's some, I was just looking at some incredible, I actually want to do a training on it here. Maybe you can come and teach about basically, I was looking at all of this incredible artwork that was like medical artwork that was created around Ayurveda and and it's like, I want to do something that's like has to do with the yogic scriptures and art history connected to the Ayurveda and how that kind of like, because I think the way that I learned history was through art. Yeah. Because you can see the tide, how consciousness moved through in astrology. I mean, you can see the whole kind of cycles of time through art. Yeah. I think similarly, you can learn a lot about kind of the yogic teachings and Ayurvedic teachings and even astrological teachings through these kind of the arts.
I'd be curious to track Neptune. For art. My teacher, he wrote a book on Neptune, and he talked a lot about, he tracked the changes in music through Neptune, through the signs. It was powerful, and it rang true. One thing I wanted to touch on, you talked about this idea of mastery, and one of the things that's become more and more evident to me in my astrological practice is lifespan development. That if I'm talking to someone who's 20 or I'm talking to someone who's 60 and they have pretty much the same chart, what I'm saying is a lot of times almost completely different. And they, thinking that you're about 40, 39, 40?
Something like that.
Yeah, around there. I'm around there too. And this idea
in that neighborhood.
And this idea of like our generation, our Pluto generation, Pluto and Libra, right?
Pluto and Libra.
It was the first time, and I'm saying it's the first time probably in the history of mankind where divorce was starting to become something that was commonplace.
Yeah.
And we were that first generation where either our parents divorced or we saw it all around us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we were the first people to have, because most people before that, when they imagined marriage or relationship, it was forever.
Right.
We were the first people that we didn't imagine that because we saw it around us that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And yes, you could make the excuse that it was a traumatic experience, but it was one that we needed to go through because the old Piscean paradigm on marriage was we sacrifice our individuality to be in a partnership with someone. And so and also if you look at our past, relationships were about survival. We were rural, we lived on farms. If you didn't like your husband, what were you going to do?
Right.
Either a prostitute or what were you going to do?
Right.
And so as we move into the Aquarian age and it's about our independence, relationships had to change.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think, and so we experienced that as kids, but now as we're coming into full bloom, right? We're coming into our 40s, into our 50s, we're coming into full bloom.
Let's just relax about the 50s part.
I'm in a hurry. I'm in a hurry to get to 50.
Let's just Shabbat Preet's like, oh great, she's going to be in a bad mood all day long.
I'm in a hurry to get to 50. Because I feel this momentum building. I look back at being young and it was great and I had a little six pack, but I was retarded. I was really stupid. And so these experiences have brought wisdom. And so as we come into full bloom, right, we take all the lessons we've learned through these experiences and we could do something with them.
Yeah.
Right? And we could do something with them.
Well, Yogi Bhajan talks about the Aquarian age and he says a lot, but in one specific, very historical kind of thing that he gave, like a Sermon on the Mount about the Aquarian age, he says there will be much less marriage.
Yes.
There will be, it's just the whole kind of relationship. And I totally, Pluto and Libra, our whole generation is about redefining. And I remember my mom said to me, when you were 5 years old, you watched the whole of Out of Africa, riveted. And as an adult, and I was like, what was that about? As a young adult, I went back and watched it, and it's so Pluto and Libra. It was all about Robert Redford explaining to Meryl Streep that relationship isn't what you think, and she was married to somebody it was an open relationship, and then she was married to this guy. It was a political relationship and an open relationship, and then her lover was Robert Redford, and she had a farm in Africa, and she wore really good, Ralph Lauren jodhpurs and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, and that's the life I want to live. Boom. And you know what, at 5 years old, but I think our whole generation, there is a real redefining of relationship.
It's so necessary.
It is necessary because it hasn't really worked out, has it?
A teacher says we're the only species on the planet that has forgotten to mate. Has forgotten how to mate.
Yeah. Any other questions from our gorgeous studio audience? Give the microphone to this gentleman right here.
Warrior. I like it.
Hi, so I don't know if I missed this or not, but I'm curious, I'm fascinated with professional athletes and their ability to sort of get into a zone, right? They talk about it in baseball, and every single athlete talks about, the professional athletes talk about getting into a zone. And I'm wondering if, given your sort of enlightened sort of experience, if that approach has infiltrated professional sports in a way where they're training more in sort of mindful meditation or other techniques, because you seem to be an anomaly, meaning that you're unlike other athletes who are trained in a very certain way, but yet certain athletes figure out how to get into a mental zone. And I'm wondering how that sort of practice that you've developed might infiltrate or,
Yeah, it's a really good question. I have a theory about this, and so I played in the NFL for 5 years, and then I took a year off, and then I came back. And in that year off, I had a spiritual awakening. I talked about this earlier, and I noticed that when I played before the spiritual awakening, there was like this almost animal-like instinct that took over, and that's how I would describe being in the zone. But after doing a lot of yoga, meditation, and becoming more conscious, it didn't work. And so when I came back to play football, I was expecting for that animal instinct to arise and take over, and it wasn't there anymore. And I had to depend on my mindfulness practice to get back into the zone. And it felt like it was a more conscious zone, where you hear a lot of football players say, after the game, it's hard to turn it off, right? And then you see, domestic violence and all these stories that you often see with football players. And my sense is that when you tap into that animal instinct, that it is hard to turn off. But when you can enter that state consciously, it becomes much easier to turn off.
That's a very interesting sophistication.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a long time to realize that, and at first I was like, did I lose it? But I realized I have to choose it. It's not just something I can wait for it to turn on.
Yeah, and also
and the reason I was able to play for, I played 11 seasons, and at my position 12 seasons, that's a long time. I had a routine, a pregame routine. I got up in the morning and did sun salutations, and I meditated for an hour. And so I was there as I entered the stadium, and that's what allowed me I think to play so long.
Are there a lot of other athletes doing that?
There wasn't 5 years ago when I was playing. It's not. I mean, the environment isn't really made for that. I had to wake up extra early. I had to get a lot of concessions to be able to maintain that lifestyle.
I do think it is changing, though.
Yeah.
I think it's changing. I mean, I think that that there's been some coaches and owners that are pushing that forward, which is great.
It is great.
Yeah.
It is great. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can people find you?
They can find me on social media. They can find me on my website. I think it's probably the best place to find me, and that's rickywilliams.life, L-I-F-E. They can find out what I'm doing.
You can actually get a reading or a session with you, which is
people can sign up for a reading. And I've changed my languaging around this, because I find when people come for one reading, it's a lot of information and it can be very powerful.
Yeah.
But the way I like to do astrology, I look at it as, let's have a conversation about your chart, right? Because conversation can be an hour, it can be 3 hours, it could be a recurring conversation. Because there's so much in a chart. Because for astrology to work, the chart has to be able to symbolize life, the complexities of life, the multitudes of life. And so, again, I look at my chart almost daily, and I'm pulling new stuff out of it every time I look.
I hear you. I think that the kind of study of the natal chart is a lifelong study, and it unfolds in ways that I think are mysterious as life itself.
Mysterious and revealing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say something else. Yeah, but I like to just sit and talk to people, and people that get readings with me, they get an extra bonus, because I'm the kind of person, and it must be in that Cancer moon. Like, if I'm working on someone's chart, it's all I think about.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about it.
Yeah.
Always thinking about it. What does this mean? Like, what, how can I look at this different? What can I say to help them? Even after the reading, I'm thinking, and I want to text them and say, oh yeah, I thought about this. I just have such a passion for learning.
Yeah.
And making it real.
Thank you so much. What is your handle? Just because, people
Instagram, @Williams.
At Williams?
I got @Williams.
Whoa. Hey,
I have no idea how. But
are you verified?
I am. I'm verified.
Okay, because my whole team is very impressed because I'm verified. So I now exist. But like all the millennials on my team, that's all they're talking about is that I'm verified. And I was like, wait a second, I thought I was verified before. Like I was self-verified, but now Instagram has verified me.
And on Twitter, I'm Rick the Laureate.
Cool.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I hope to talk to you for many, many times to come, and that you continue to share your wisdom with our Sangit, our community. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. In closing, I just want to say thank you. You've been a powerful person in Linnea's life, and you know, your input has really helped our relationship grow into something that I think we're both proud of. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.